a tenor saxophone, making love to a cello at perfect pitch. And you are so smooth. That's why we keep it here on 98.1. This is Justin EJ, signing out.
Alrighty, time to take a walk into the papers and, of course, look at all the important stories making the rounds that have us talking. Analysis will follow as well as your contributions, your messages, your opinions, your points of view perspective as well. This is Freshly Pressed on the Smooth Breakfast right here on Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live station on a Thursday morning, 31 minutes past 7 a.m. Ayokunmi here, ready to have great conversation. Alongside me are Mr. C and, of course, Gbubemi. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good
Welcome to the
morning,
show.
Ayo. Good morning, Mr. C. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, Aya. Good morning, Gbubemi. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, so Lagos, Nigeria, the entire world, wherever it is you're listening to us right now, you can send your contributions, your messages to us on WhatsApp on 0809 444 0981. 0809 444 0981. Please keep your messages as concise as possible. Makes it easier to run through. Let's keep it civil and get to the point, really. Thank you very, very much. You can also join us on YouTube and drop your comments there at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. All right, let's get the show on the road and begin our journey in the Vanguard. Mr. C, let's talk about power here. Now, the federal government on Wednesday disclosed that about 8.8 billion naira has been spent to repair and put into functional use power transmission towers attacked by vandals and bandits across the country. Now, this is according to a statement by the special advisor to the Minister of Power on Communications, Mr. Bolaji Tunji. Now, he said this disclosure was made by the managing director of the transmission company of Nigeria, engineer Suleiman Ahmed Abdulaziz, at the quarterly power sector working group meeting in Abuja.
Okay, thank you, Aya. So, yes, this meeting did hold yesterday, and as part of the deliberations or as part of the discussions, we were informed that between January 13th, 2024, 2024, and today, 128 transmission towers have been attacked by terrorists. I refuse to call them vandals or bandits as described in the report because this is an act. These are acts of terrorism.
Mm.
Because when you attack critical national infrastructure such as power, you can't class it as ordinary stealing. Now, the sum of 8.8 billion naira has been spent repairing or replacing these transmission towers. And it's really baffling that there are some human beings who are so selfish, so self centered, that they've caused the nation to expend this sum of money which could have been put into other areas of the economy for better uses and for better benefits that were accrued to a generality of the people. Now, as part of the discussion, it was also explained that they experienced difficulties in accessing those sites to replace the towers because the soldiers that were assigned to them would either complain that it wasn't safe and they were not going out at all, or they could only work for 2 hours a day. Now, this is very instructive because these are not policemen, these are not private security guards.
Mm.
These are soldiers trained by the government, paid by the government, and they're saying it's not safe. So it then begs the question, what exactly is going on within Nigeria where unidentified non-state actors terrorize civilians and trained security personnel alike? Because if the soldiers were not scared or frightened or threatened, they would not be saying it's not safe. If it's not safe for a soldier to go anywhere within Nigeria, what does that then tell the ordinary Nigerian who's not a trained soldier, who's not a trained security officer? What does that say about the state of Nigeria's security currently? What does this say? What does this tell a potential foreign investor who hears news that the body tasked with protecting the country has members who are afraid? It gets even better. The minister then said there were plans to ensure that 50 million Nigerians get access to electricity by the year 2030 as part of a broader plan with the African Development Bank and the World Bank to ensure that 300 million Africans get access to electricity. Now, he did say that the electricity would be obtained from solar sources, micro and mini grids, and the like. Now, it's instructive. 2030 is 6 years from now, but literally 2024 is over, so it's 5 years.
5 years, thereabouts, yeah.
5 years. Now, the same minister has previously said that we need about $10 billion annually to be invested into Nigeria's power industry over the next 10 years to get any sort of increased gains. So if we're to use his benchmark for the 50 million Nigerians, we'll probably look at anything between 40 to 50 billion dollars over the next 5 years. It has to come in. Now, are we going to borrow all of that from the African Development Bank and the World Bank? Are we then saying during that period there will be no other borrowings by the federal government, either to fund budget deficits or for some projects that may come up between now and the anticipated 2030? Highly unlikely. So the big question to the Minister for Power is, this is a laudable objective, and it will be very nice if it can be achieved. But the salient question remains, how do you intend to fund it? Because people who have little or no trust in this administration will say this is another soundbite. There is no roadmap towards achieving this. But yes, he says we're in talks with the African Development Bank and the World Bank. That you're in talks doesn't mean those talks will pan out successfully. But yes, you're in talks, so we'll give you the benefits of the doubt.
Right.
But what is the roadmap? Are there timelines we can look at and we can cross-check individually? Because if you're looking at 50 million Nigerians by 2030, right? So in 2025, what's the number you're looking to onboard? In 2026, what's the number you're looking to onboard? Certainly, you're not looking to onboard 50 million at once. So you have to stagger it, because that's what will make sense. That is what will resonate with people who are also monitoring these developments.
Definitely.
So he needs to share more details with us. It will also be important to know the funding requirements. And if we're taking loans, if we're going to take loans or borrow facilities, what's the tenor, what's the amount, what's the tenor, what's the interest rate, what are we looking at? But more importantly, what is the plan for 2025? How many Nigerians are you intending to onboard?
Those are the questions. Before we leave this story, Mr. C, I just need to put this out there as well. Another question that we need to ask is, bearing in mind what was said by the security personnel, the soldiers, and all that. Up until this point, they have told us we spent about 8.8 billion on this. Now the army has said it is dangerous for the engineers and co to go to these installations. Now, if the army can say this because of the level of threat that these terrorists have, what then is the guarantee that we will not continue this spending continuously over a period of time? If we spent 8.8 billion already, what's the guarantee that these terrorists are not going to continue vandalizing and we keep spending all this money to repair?
Okay, so good. That's a brilliant question. And I'm going to tell you something I should have said earlier. Now, they did also tell us that people have been previously arrested for attacking those towers and destroying them. Well, that the police, when they're handed over to the Nigeria Police Force, the Nigeria Police Force incidents or writes the report as a simple case of theft. It is not theft. This goes beyond theft, and that is why they've continued to attack these towers, and the number of attacks continues to increase. They should be treated as terrorists and properly tried at the Federal High Court, because the way I'm looking at this now, it would appear they're being tried in some magistrate courts or some local courts around those areas, and that's why they continue to do this. If you start to treat this as a proper case of terrorism, right, and you arraign the first set of suspects in the court, you ensure that you speedily prosecute the matter with the evidence you have, we should start to see a sharp decline. Now, yes, how do we prevent this from happening again? Many things. What are the access routes to these places? Can you place security personnel around the access routes? Can we also use technology, drones. If you can't afford a satellite, use drones. Use local, get some of the local vigilantes to also help you watch. For a fee, they will do it gladly. Have real time monitoring of these assets so that, because to vandalize it, you have to be around there. So if you have real time, have motion sensors, motion alarms, these things are not rocket science and they don't cost a fortune. Why we're not using them beats my imagination.
As usual, more questions than possible answers. But anyways, we watch and we observe. Let's keep things moving. This morning, I'm going to bring this story to your table with me. Let's talk about Vice President Shettima. Now we know President Tinubu is out of the country on a state visit to France, and Vice President Shettima on Wednesday morning departed Abuja for Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire to attend the opening ceremony of the International Exhibition of Extractive and Energy Resources. That's the SIREXE, SIREXE 2024 conference. Now, according to a release issued on Wednesday by the media assistant to the Vice President Stanley Nkwocha, the conference is an international event organized by the government of Cote d'Ivoire that focuses on policies and strategy for the sustainable development of extractive and energy industries. It's supposed to hold from November 22nd, 27th, that was yesterday, to December the 2nd. Now, my question is this. For this sort of conference, is the presence of the vice president needed? I mean, shouldn't this be a conference attended by those who are directly involved in this particular industry, who would, should I say, benefit directly from it as opposed to the vice president?
One of the things that occurred to me was exactly what you've just said, and I thought, why isn't the Minister of Petroleum at the conference? But clearly, the Minister of Petroleum is the president.
He's in France.
Yeah, but we have a Minister of State for Petroleum who we rarely hear anything from, and I was wondering why didn't he go there? Well, the report says that that he was invited by the vice president of Cote d'Ivoire, but irrespective, I believe that they could have sent someone who's more directly tied to the sector to speak on our behalf. But anyway, that's where we are. The report says that he was supposed to return later Wednesday. Initially, it was a bit confusing because it seemed like he was supposed to return in a week, but then he's supposed to have returned last night. According to some other articles that I've seen. So he just attended the opening ceremony. And at the opening ceremony, he spoke about the milestones that we have achieved in our extractive industries, also within our petroleum sector. He's highlighted the restructuring of the NMPC and how they believe they have achieved gains within that sector and how they're positioning for the future. He's also spoken about the local content improvements in the extractive sector within Nigeria, focusing majorly on, excuse me, on the oil and gas industries, highlighting things like the marginal fields, investments, and all of that. So if we remember, we have some marginal oil fields that were sold at some point, to encourage local production of petrol, in addition to our importing of petrol. So basically, what he's just done, was just to go and highlight what they believe are the benefits of extractive and petroleum industry within Nigeria, and then also to call on further collaboration within Africa. If there's anything that I'm sure we all know about, regarding Africa, is the fact that, it seems as though, or rather, the reality is that Africa appears to be a plundered continent. We have, nationals from other countries coming in to legally and illegally extract our resources, whether they are gold or iron or cobalt or whatever, and there needs to be a lot more enforcement of laws around all of this. A lot of all the security issues we see, even within Africa, could probably even be tied to these extractive resources and how they are illegally or inappropriately mined or assessed. So we can see that there's also a tie-in with that, because Africa is also another continent that has a lot of security issues.
Right.
So this conference is the first one. I'd like to believe that whatever the gains that come from this will inspire future conferences, and then hopefully, let's see what the benefit to Africa is, But my view also always is typically we have a lot of all these like talk shops and conferences and things, people come, sit down, deliberate, write white papers, panels, and all of that. By the end of the day, we don't really see, any impact
Those are the issues.
from that.
Those are the issues.
So for me, I think there needs to be a lot more emphasis on execution. So whatever resolutions are made as an outcome of this conference, how do you ensure that the nations you have invited to attend this conference, abide by those resolutions? How do you ensure that they enforce them? What kind of support will be available? Bearing in mind that these are different countries with different laws, different peculiarities, and all of that. So let's see. Over and above all of this, I believe it becomes increasingly stronger that Africa needs to work together to be able to resolve Africa's issues.
Right.
And until we can achieve that kind of result, Africa will continue to act in 55 different parts or 56 different parts. We need a situation where there's a lot more synergy across all of the governments, across all of these sort of sectors, so that countries, nations can support each other in terms of all of these issues.
All right. All right. Thank you for those thoughts, Gbubemi. Michael on WhatsApp says, as they fix, the terrorists will destroy transmission equipment. There's absolutely no synergy within the government to handle issues with terrorism. We need our very own Guantanamo Bay loco. Treat them as terrorists with clear punitive measures. Dapo from Ibadan today, Dapo. He says, sorry, correction. Africa doesn't appear to be a plundered continent. Africa actually happens to be
I was
a
being
plundered
politically correct.
continent. I mean, when you think as far back as the Berlin Conference,
Yeah.
and that was in 1884, you would get the clear picture. Anyways, let's get back into the stories. Mr. C, let's talk about the Port Harcourt refinery. I haven't gotten your thoughts on this one. We talked about this yesterday, but we need to bring it to the fore still because it's still in the news. Just a quick reminder, after 7 postponements, the Port Harcourt refinery has finally commenced fuel production, promising a daily supply of 200 trucks. About 1 million liters of refined products were released from the plant on Tuesday, of course. The NNPCL, did the whole shindig, unveiling the refinery and so on and so forth. It's been said that it's operating at about 70% of its installed capacity. Now, the group GMD Medicare has said that the bigger plant in Port Harcourt, as well as Warri and Kaduna, will come on stream later. However, he declined to give a timeline because the president, Bola Tinubu, warned him from doing so after several postponements. So, I mean, they've taken a cue from the failings from before. Let's work in silence, more or less. But anyways, Mr. C, let's get your thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Ayo. So on Tuesday, Nigerians were treated to the facade of a lifetime. Trucks were mobilized to the site of the old Port Harcourt refinery. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, there are 2 refineries in Port Harcourt. The first refinery was built in 1965, and it's a 60,000 barrel capacity refinery. Now, that refinery cannot produce petrol. It was never designed to produce or refine crude oil into petrol. Very key fact. Let's remember this. The second refinery was built in 1989. It's a 150,000 barrel capacity plant. Now, that plant is not ready. From insiders, they say that with the grace of God included, we're probably looking at a 2026 date. Probably. Now, when the NNPCL announced that operations had resumed at the old refinery, which they failed to state, some Nigerians were jubilant. Now, questions that pondered my mind, which have now been cleared. Did the plant possess a fluid catalytic converter unit? No. That's why it can't produce petrol. So what did they do? They got cracked C5 resins, which are used for plastic adhesives and the like, mixed it with naphtha and some other substances, and produced run-straight gasoline. Now, that is a product they intend to load into those trucks and then sell to members of the public. And run-straight gasoline is different from premium motor spirit, which we regularly buy. Run straight gasoline has a lower octane level, and because of that, engines that use run straight gasoline tend to pack up, and what we call in Nigerian parlance, the engines will knock.
Mm.
Now, this is very instructive because no one is talking about the destructive properties of run straight gasoline. And this is my advice to motorists. When you pull up to buy petrol now, please insist on collecting the receipts. That may just be the beginning of your saving grace in the event that your engine gets damaged. Now, I'm surprised that the regulators are not saying anything about this. We had the regulator of the upstream and upstream regulatory commission commending the start of the refinery. Now we're told the others will come on stream. Fantastic. Where is the crude that they need to operate going to come from? Nobody's asking that question. We have a refinery in Lagos that can't get all the crude it needs. It still has to import. There was some nonsense going on about increased oil production. Thankfully, that has proven and established to be a lie, because the regulator says we haven't gotten there yet. The political statements were 1.8 million barrels a day. That's not true. The regulator says you're doing 1.5, including condensates. So by the time they pull on stream all these refineries, where's the crude to feed them going to come from? Remember, we're in agreements with companies, local and international, to extract our crude, right?
Right.
Under joint venture agreements or production sharing contracts. Now, under those contracts, we typically take about 60% after all the expenses have been taken out, right? Now, from that 60%, we must remember that we've mortgaged some to collect loans.
Already, yes.
Now, from that 60%, some will still vanish.
A problem we're still dealing with.
It's not a problem. You are the one who sees it as a problem. It's not a problem for the people involved.
That's a problem for every other Nigerian at the end of the day.
So we have a situation where we need to increase production to sell more outside the country so that we can get in more foreign exchange and pay down our loans and even start investing in capital expenditure, hopefully. So the bigger question here is, stop telling us refineries will open. When they open, where are they getting the crude from? Outside the Dangote refinery, there are about 7 or 8 other refineries in Nigeria that are supposed to be functional. They simply can't get crude locally. So it begs the question, when you open them, then what? You continue blending. That cannot be a sustainable long-term plan. So we need to stop with the deceit, the smoke and mirrors, the fog, and just get down to the basic facts. What are we doing? Stop trying to score cheap political wins. It's not going to work. Where are you getting the crude from? And I can bet my last dollar the NNPC doesn't have an answer to that question. Convince Nigerians, come out, address a press conference, itemize everything. Tell us this refining, this is where it's going to get its crude from. So you can continue to tell us, oh, it will be releasing products. Products made where?
Products made how?
No. We know how products are made. Where were they made? Because it's key. If the refinery isn't getting the crude, how are you making the products?
The $1,000,000 questions. The $1,000,000 questions. Okay, let me take a couple of messages there already beginning to line up so I can get through everything. Adigbuiga Adidiji says the truth is all have compromised, all are compromised. Those in the Ministry of Power, electricity workers, soldiers, and security officials assigned to secure the electricity towers and facilities and so on. I don't be surprised if all these are done to justify the $10 billion loan requested by the Minister of Power. This is Nigeria. Well, yes, it is. It is Nigeria. Jerry says the Port Harcourt refinery only blended, not refined. My question is that if it was blending they were going to do, why wait for 20 years? These are the questions, man. Michael says, but I don't trust his subs to speak for themselves. Ha. I read somewhere this Port Harcourt refinery will only supply NNPC entities. Please, why? I think this administration is just proficient with spin doctors. This is Daniel. Daniel says, the shenanigans around our oil industry, upstream and downstream, are disheartening. I cannot believe that misinformation is now being made into an instrument of governance. It's a simple matter to prove the naysayers wrong about this Port Harcourt refinery, but instead we will get smoke and mirrors. I'm worried about the future. I mean, we're all worried about the future, really.
Be more worried about the present. The future will sort itself out.
Will it? Will it though? Will it though?
You have to get through today first.
One step at a time. All right. Let's head into the Guardian and talk about taxes. Now, the federal government has been accused of mismanaging over 60 taxes and levies collected across the country. Now, the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Edele, made these allegations during a Senate plenary session on Wednesday. It's really telling, I mean, for him to come out and say that over 60 taxes and levies collected across the country have been mismanaged up until this point. It shouldn't be surprising, but hey, here we are. Let's run through this one.
First, I think the headline is a bit misleading because I've read that story across some various news articles. I don't think he put it exactly that way. I think what he was trying to say is that there's a lot of confusion within the tax regimes in the country, such that there's a lot of double taxation. For example, they're taxing the wrong people as far as they're concerned. The amount of money received in tax is inadequate because the tax laws across the country, across states, federal and state level, conflict in some areas. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of confusion within the tax regime. So he was at the Senate together with the chairman of the FIRS and the DG of the Budget Office of the Federation to talk about the tax reforms that they are proposing and to, should I say, encourage the Senate to pass the 4 tax reform bills that they've put together. So those tax reform bills are the Nigeria Tax Bill, the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill, the Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and the Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill. And what they've said is that these bills are not necessarily new bills in that sense, but they seek to harmonize all of the tax regimes across the country. One key thing is also that they are trying to seek a link between states and the federal government in terms of tax collection, reporting, and all of that. And they're also trying to make sure that taxes are connected with income. So, for example, the way it is now, if I let's say, for example, if I don't have a formal job, and I run my personal business, I can probably survive without paying any form of tax, direct tax. What they're now trying to do is to also link, like the BVN, for example, to tax. So once your economic activity can be determined, then you can be taxed. That's just one of the things that one of these tax bills will cover. And what they're also saying is that, for example, we have a minimum tax. So people who earn minimum wage, for example, will pay a minimum tax. They're saying that that's improper because if people who earn minimum wage, that can barely take them home are forced to pay tax, and then we have a lot of people who are earning a lot of money and the tax is not progressively calibrated to ensure that they pay more tax. There's also things like VAT, for example. So they've said, VAT collection and VAT sharing is not properly done. So you have a situation where some states generate the bulk of the VAT. However, that VAT is not equitably shared within the areas where the VAT has been consumed. So it looks as though some are just working for some states are just working for some other states. Those are just some of the things that some of these tax bills will cover.
Right.
And basically they're saying that, if we can harmonize all of these tax laws, they can remove all of the double taxation issues. They can ensure that the taxes are properly calculated and calibrated across all sectors. They can ensure that, businesses who make profits pay taxes against those who are probably, experiencing financial challenges. They can make sure that the rich pay more tax as against those who, are poor and all of that. Basically, they're just trying to improve our tax situation to be able to earn more money. You know, I will have to read all of the four tax laws that are being proposed, you know, to get a bit more clarity, you know. But generally, off what I've read peripherally about the tax laws, this is what they're saying. So basically, the Senate didn't ask any questions at that session. As we all know, there are some states, I think all of the northern states actually are against the tax reform bills as reported by the media. And it would have been expected that the Senate should have asked a few questions regarding this, but they've postponed that session to some other time. So I hope and I pray that they sit down, they can adequately, you know, collate the right questions to ask.
So I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry. The Senate knew they were coming. They weren't surprise guests, and they had no questions to ask.
That surprised me as well.
Yet they'll ask questions at
No,
the
I'm
later
sorry.
date.
That is utterly irresponsible. That's disgraceful. You were expecting the tax team. This was a scheduled visit. It wasn't an impromptu visit, and you had no questions to ask. It says a lot about the Senate.
Indeed, Mr. C. Let's talk about. I know time has absolutely run out, but we need to talk about this very quickly. Yaya Bello, he's been remanded in custody of the FCC, and case adjourned till December 10.
Very quickly, the comedy show continues. He's finally made himself available because he needs to enjoy his Christmas season. On the 10th, he will be granted bail. He didn't kill anyone, and life will continue. End of story.
End of story. All right, let's round up a couple of messages here. D from Ikeja says, Mr. C and Gbubemi have hit both balls out of the park yet again. Those in authority simply do not love this country. They overwork and exploit this country like the master does the slave. Hence, why there's a history of very poor maintenance and management culture of federal assets. Abayomi says Mr. C is absolutely spot on with his response regarding the power terrorists. I recommend that the head of the Mercerized Division be summoned for further clarification. It is deeply concerning how soldiers who have sworn to protect and safeguard lives now openly make such statements without hesitation. Corrupt soldiers are often easy to identify, as some benefit from facilitating the illegal exploitation of our natural resources by foreigners. Steve says, if the army can't secure our assets on account of insecurity, then there's a problem. Those fellows caught vandalizing national assets should be treated as enemies of the nation. No bail application should be granted whatsoever for them or from them, as the case may be. Dami from Ikeja says, when the government puts more effort into pumping out false feel-good narratives than actually solving problems, they forget that you can fool some of the people all of the time, all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. All right. Let me see here. Let's take one more. Tony from Marine Beach says, tax here, tax there, tax everyone and everything. That's all the ideas of our leaders can think about in a country so rich to be thinking about giving stipends to citizens as done in other climes. So sad. All right, we really need to go. Thank you so much for all the messages, and thank you so much, Mr. C and Gbubemi, for joining me this morning. It's been great having you in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, do have a great morning, guys. And of course, keep it tuned to Smooth 98.1 and the Smooth Breakfast. We'll get into the grapevine at 8:15. It's going to be a fun time, entertainment, and a whole lot more.
The stories, the news, in-depth analysis of national current affairs.